Welcome back. The Far End of the Bench YouTube channel. Thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe. We're back with another NCAA football top 10. Nico got his chance to get his top 10 out there last week. We did have some differences. He maybe influenced some of my picks this week. But for whatever reason, since we've started this exclusive series, we seem to have a jinx out for somebody, because somebody that we mentioned in our top 10 ends up going down. Ole Miss went down last week with Nico. Obviously, when I put my first video out, it was Kentucky and it was Iowa. So I don't know what's going on. Hopefully we don't mention one of your teams. If we do, we apologize, but not really. I don't know, depending on how much you believe in curses. But before we get into this, just wanted to mention we are sponsored by our favorite sports betting app, MyBookie. MyBookie is the easiest and most fun place to wager on sports. Nico and I are very proud to be affiliated with them. For a limited time only, when you sign up and create an account at mybookie.ag, use our promo code BENCH, B-E-N-C-H, all caps, and you'll double your first deposit. It's time to put your money where your mouth is. Go to mybookie.ag, promo code BENCH, B-E-N-C-H, and you'll double your first deposit. Get in on the winnings this season. Let's get into the first three out for Week 10 of the NCAA football season. This week for the first three out, it's one team that's been on the list the last couple weeks, and it's two teams that are new that I'm going to introduce because I'm very intrigued as to how their season is going to end. Let's start with number 13, Ole Miss, the furthest team out of the top 10 for me. That lost last week to Auburn. Auburn's a good team. I don't think anybody can doubt that, and Bo Nix is playing at a different level. He's playing at the I'm going to beat Alabama on the Iron Bowl level, which makes me very excited and nervous to see how the rest of the season is going to go. But Matt Corral and the Rebels, Lane Kiffin as well, I mean, he's got that program in a decent place. We'll see how much longer he sticks around since there's so many jobs opening up. The Ole Miss is at number 13. Number 12, the team that we just talked about, beat the Rebels last weekend. The Auburn Tigers, 6-2 behind Bo Nix. Their losses, they have one loss to Penn State at Happy Valley, and they pretty much were a few plays away from sealing that one up. And they have that big game coming up against Alabama where they can clinch their spot in the SEC championship game and effectively eliminate the Crimson Tide from the playoffs. You know, that's always interesting when the Tigers have that opportunity in front of them. And number 11, closest team out, and a team that could very well put themselves into the top 10 depending on how their next few weeks go. The Baylor Bears out there in Waco, 7-1 on the season. Their loss coming to ranked Oklahoma. It was a close game. Actually, one second, I'm going to double check my work here. This is why we do this and have the computer in front of us. Their loss is to Oklahoma State, 24-14. So that's their one loss. Oklahoma State still in my top 10 this week and still ranked in the top 15 of the top 25 polls. And it'll be interesting. We're filming this before the first playoff rankings come out. So we just had the AP and the coaches poll. That's my first three out. 13 through 11. Now let's get into the number 10 team on this week's countdown. Starting off the list at number 10, it's the Oklahoma State Cowboys. They bounced back from their loss 2 weeks ago to Iowa State. I mentioned it. I was like, this seems very familiar. And I would say the major difference is that this time when Oklahoma State went to Ames and lost to Iowa State, there wasn't a school tragedy as there was the last time that I was talking about. The Cowboys, though, they still, basically all the teams with one loss have backed themselves into a corner. They know from here on out you have to win and you have to continue to play good football, or your season and your hopes of the postseason will be over. If the season were to end today, Oklahoma State would be one of the two teams in the Big 12 championship. They're a little bit different. They don't have divisions. They just take the best two records at the end of the season and throw them in the Big 12 championship. So the Cowboys still have a chance to do that. If they are able to get there and win the Big 12 championship, I think they're still in the conversation of making it into the playoff. They have the big win over Texas. They have at that point, if they do win the rest of the games, they would have probably 2 victories over Oklahoma. They would have a very game resume, but for now, the Cowboys are near the bottom. They have their game coming up this week at West Virginia, and it'll be interesting to see how the Cowboys shake out. I know Mike Gundy's going to have those boys ready, and the Cowboys are sitting at number 10 this week for the top 10 rankings. Going down to number 9. It's the third time in a row that Michigan has landed at the number 9 spot for me. The Wolverines 7-1 after their loss to Michigan State. I'm going to go ahead and call it what it is. It was a collapse. I was taking a nap during that game, or I might have been coaching my game. Wasn't really paying attention. I woke up, saw the highlight. Michigan blows the biggest lead in the rivalry's history, 16 points, and Kenneth Walker III went off. 200 yards, 5 touchdowns, basically won the game himself. But the Wolverines, they're still in a spot where they can come out on top of this thing. If Michigan State beats Ohio State and then they beat Ohio State, there's ways that they can get themselves in the Big Ten championship game. That is their only last-ditch effort to make it into the playoff. Michigan will not be considered for the Final Four if they don't have a conference championship because, their resume, they're 7-1. The only really good team that they've played so far, they've lost to. The next best team besides Michigan State that they've played is Nebraska at Nebraska, and that was a very close game. There's definitely a difference between Michigan State and Nebraska. So Michigan, they have a lot of work to still improve. I don't know how Harbaugh still has his job, but I guess we're going to continue to roll with that. And unfortunately for the people in Ann Arbor, the Wolverines don't move up at all and are on the verge of probably eliminating themselves from postseason contention come the end of November. But the Michigan Wolverines, number 9, with their game coming up this week at home against Indiana, it'll be interesting to see how the Hoosiers come out against the Wolverines. Number 8, a new addition to the list, the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Now, hear me out. They are undefeated. They are in a Power 5 conference. They beat Duke last week 45-7, put up some style points. Sam Hartman had 5 touchdowns in that game. Sam Hartman having a sneaky good season as well for the Demons out there. Unfortunately, I think Wake Forest has the worst timing that you can possibly imagine. They are the best team in the ACC when this is probably the worst season of ACC football we've seen. I think probably going back 15 years. It's bad this year. Pitt, right now, if the season were to end, it would be Wake Forest and Pitt in the ACC championship game. Those are 2 teams that I think are pretty good. It's soft after that. It's really soft. And I don't know. I think Wake Forest is going to end up, they don't have a ranked Clemson team to beat. They don't have another ranked opponent coming up on the schedule. They would have to make it and win the conference championship, hopefully hope for chaos in all the other conferences. They just won't be able to say that they've had a signature win like some of these other schools. But I really like what they're doing. And I think Sam Hartman has something cooking. Is Wake Forest going to be this good again? Probably not. I think this is going to be a one-and-done type of deal for them. But it's a great season for the school, and they do play football over in Wake Forest. I didn't even know that. I don't even think they have a sport to claim, but Wake Forest football is back, and they're at number 8. They have their game coming up. They're going to Raleigh to play the Tar Heels in North Carolina. But number 8, Wake Forest Demon Deacons in the NCAA Top 10 this week. Coming in at number 7, this is where Nico influenced me from last week, the Oregon Ducks. 7-1. They beat Colorado 52-29. Now, I think Colorado did come back and backdoor cover the spread. It was not pretty up until that point. There's a lot of Buckeye fans in Oregon. I think Oregon, they have to hope that Ohio State wins out. At least the rest of their schedule maybe loses in the Big Ten championship. But as long as the Buckeyes keep winning, Oregon can look at themselves and go, yes, we have the loss to Stanford. And yes, that loss looks really bad now. Stanford's on a 3-game losing streak. It doesn't look good. But they still have that win going to Columbus and beating Ohio State in the Horseshoe. That Week 2 win is going to carry them through a conference championship, 1 loss. They've put up some decent numbers. They looked solid at times. I think if you put Oregon in the Final Four, I can name you 4 or 5 teams that would probably punch them in the mouth, and they would be one and done as a 4 seed. But Oregon at this point control their own destiny. Their defense is looking tough. It's one of the better defenses that Oregon's had for quite some time. Kayvon Thibodeau and Noah Sewell are studs. I think they're going to be great at the next level. But right now, number 7, and I think they're one of the 2 schools that have the least control of their own destiny. It's them and it's Cincinnati that have to hope for a lot of chaos. But they have their next game coming up at Washington, going to play the Huskies, and we'll see how the Ducks fare coming out in after this Week 10 of the NCAA season. Coming in at number 6, another new team, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I think they've done well enough the past few weeks. I mentioned 2 weeks ago that Cincinnati might be shaking in their boots because there was a chance that Notre Dame could lose their last 3 games. They didn't. They're still 7-1. Their only loss coming to Cincinnati at home. So they obviously are still proud of that. They're still able to wear that as a decent badge of honor. They beat North Carolina last week, 44-34. It was a fairly easy affair. When Jack Cohn's in the game, it's a totally different Notre Dame Irish team that we're seeing. They have Kyron Williams, who dropped 200 yards like nothing against North Carolina. They also are going to have the detriment of playing an ACC-type schedule. They're playing all the SEC schools. I don't think they're eligible for the ACC championship. I think that was just the one-and-done thing with the COVID year in 2020. Right now, they're probably a New Year's Six team and could finish the season with 1 or 2 losses, but that's about the highest that I could see the Irish getting. That it's going to come down to them not playing a conference championship. When you don't play a conference championship, you lose out on one of the major criteria that the selection committee uses when it comes to the college football playoff. But Notre Dame, they have their game this week against Navy, hosting Navy in South Bend. That's going to be a fun one. Navy's been putting up a lot of points the last few weeks, so the Irish have a couple of fun games left on their schedule. Then we'll see what bowl they end up in, but they're coming in at number 6 for my weight rankings this week. Coming down to number 5, the Ohio State Buckeyes. The Ohio State Buckeyes. They beat Penn State last week, 33-24, in one of their first of the major 4 games that they have coming up on their schedule of Big Ten opponents to try and solidify their spot in the East of the Big Ten Championship. But the Buckeyes, they are a very dangerous team. I think they're the team right now that if you asked any coach in the country who do you want to play least, you'd say Ryan Day and the Ohio State Buckeyes. C.J. Stroud is getting on point. He's learning the offense. They're playing really solid defense. I think they probably could have beat Penn State by 20 if they wanted to. Penn State is a decent team, and Clifford had an okay game. Their defense came up in huge situations. They're playing pretty much lights out right now, and they know with that 1 loss they have to win the rest of their games on their schedule, like we've been saying for all of the teams with 1 loss. But the Buckeyes are in a very good position right now. Don't fall into the trap game at Purdue this week. They have their game. Purdue's coming into the shoe, and we know how the Boilermakers like to make an entrance in Big Ten games. Don't lose this weekend and then take care of business against Michigan and Michigan State. You'll have your shot and a good argument to be in the Final Four of the playoff this year. That's the Ohio State Buckeyes at number 5. When I gamble, I'm always looking for a way to get an edge, but at MyBookie, they double your first deposit, so you start with a leg up.
Use my promo code BENCH, that is capital BENCH. Sign up now, claim your first deposit bonus with MyBookie, and use the extra funds to kickstart your winning season. It's time to get back on track, ladies and gentlemen. This weekend, lay the points with Arizona so they continue streaking in San Francisco, coming off a tough loss in against Green Bay. Arizona, you know they're going to get back right on track. With the top 2 offenses going against one another this weekend also, you have Titans without Derrick Henry and the Rams with newly acquired former Denver Bronco Von Miller as well. That game is going to be toe-to-toe on Sunday night. You can safely smash the over or the under, whatever you're feeling. Don't just take my word for it. Head to MyBookie and sign up now using promo code BENCH, that is capital BENCH, to get your money doubled and start your winning today.
Remember, good friends don't let friends win alone, so have your buddies use your referral link and you're eligible to receive an additional 250% bonus on their first deposit. Plus, it's unlimited to redeem, so all your friends can join the party at MyBookie. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. This week at number 4, I have the Alabama Crimson Tide. 7-1 on the season. They just beat Tennessee 52-24. And I'm starting to think Saban had this planned. He wanted his team to lose a game so that they wouldn't have any more room for error and they wouldn't lose out on the opportunity of competing for a national title, because we've seen in years past recently that when Alabama goes into the SEC championship game undefeated, that's kind of a recipe for a disaster. Right now, they've got their young gunslinger Bryce Young calmed down. I say young because he's only 20 years old, and it blows my mind that he's quarterbacking one of the top programs of college football history, period. Their defense, their coaching problems have been ironed out. Going to be tough when they go to Auburn for a trip to the Iron Bowl, and that'll have a trip for the SEC Championship on the line, it looks like right now. They also have a tough game coming up against LSU with Ed Ogeron on his final run. How poetic would it be for Coach O to beat Nick Saban and end his Alabama Crimson Tide's chance at what he could be seeing in the national championship. But right now, Alabama is sitting pretty at number 4. They have a very good shot of moving up, especially if they win their conference championship. The Tide look to roll on. They're in a good place. Number 3. This one was really tough, and you're gonna notice. I'm gonna throw just an honorable mention in here at the end because I think that they deserve it, but I also don't think that they've gotten the help outside of what they need. I was gonna put Cincinnati at number 3 again. I've had Cincinnati at number 3 in the past. I think that they're playing well. They aren't doing what I said they needed to do 2 weeks ago, and that was put up style points when they play their teams in their conference. They beat Navy by a touchdown. They put up some points the week after, but it hasn't been as impressive as they've needed it to be. And for that reason, at number 3 this week, I have the Michigan State Spartans coming off their win against their in-state rival, Michigan. 16-point comeback and solidifying that they have the number 1 running back in the country and a possible Heisman candidate. I think that that's a very real possibility right now for Kenneth Walker III. The Spartans under Mel Tucker, I think maybe Mel Tucker wanted to win that game and have that come back badly enough so that maybe he can show his talents around for some of the other jobs coming up in the country. LSU, he coached there under Nick Saban. I recently found that out, but this is going to be an interesting thing for the Spartans. Win out the rest of your schedule. I say that, pretty much at this point in the season, you have to win the rest of the games on the schedule. So now that I've said that, I will stop mentioning it. But the Spartans beat Ohio State. If they beat Penn State, that they still have left on the schedule, it looks like they could possibly have a Purdue in the conference championship because Iowa blew their shot. They had the West sewn up, and then they lost to Wisconsin. So who knows who you're going to end up playing on the other side. But Big Ten champion has had a history of being the representative of the Final Four in the college football playoff. I think the Spartans can be that. They've proven that they proved that they could beat a really good team down big in the second half, and they passed their other 2 tests left on the season. I think that their game coming up is going to be a big indication of how Mel Tucker's Spartans are going to be able to finish out this season. Upcoming for the Spartans, they have a trip to Purdue. Purdue doesn't actually play Ohio State until the following week. Purdue will have go Michigan State and then Ohio State, but they play the Boilermakers in Indiana. So Michigan State's got a tough road game coming up, but I think they'll be able to handle it. They're my number 3 team this week in the college football top 10. Number 2, I have the Oklahoma Sooners. The Oklahoma Sooners have looked really decent, or not decent. They look decent under Spencer Rattler. They've looked really good under Caleb Williams. That Kansas game, a little bit weird for me. They bounced back and beat the crap out of Texas Tech. So I think they'll be fine. Lincoln Riley is a wizard. I think he's one of the premier coaches in college football right now. I don't know if he'd be a great coach at the NFL level, but I think he can take over whatever program you put him in, and it would be spot on what you would need. He'll be able to turn your program around and at least win you 8 games a season. I like Caleb Williams right now. He's one of the most explosive players in college football. And when the Oklahoma Sooners have a guy like that at quarterback, think back to Kyler Murray, think back to Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield, the Sooners are able to run the table and do what they do in the Big 12 because of those guys, and they listen to Lincoln Riley so well. So the Sooners, they're probably a lock for the Big 12 championship, and from there, they're probably a lock to be put into the Final Four. But Oklahoma right now with their game against Baylor, tough test coming up in Waco next weekend, not this coming weekend. They'll have a bye this weekend. It'll be interesting to see how the Sooners shake out. But right now they're sitting at number 2. I think that they're a lock for the Final Four no matter what come the end of the season. Number 1, not that hard to figure out. It's going to be number 1 until they lose or look bad, but they dominated Florida. I thought that they would beat Florida. I said you should take the 14-point spread. because I didn't think that Florida would get blown out the way that they did. Georgia's defense is for real. We always have to remind ourselves of that. We think that Georgia's defense is good, but maybe they'll have an off day. No, they don't have an off day. It's like Khabib's wrestling. He's never going to forget how to take a guy down with a double leg. The Georgia Bulldogs are never going to forget how to smother opposing offenses and just not let them score. And that's what they did in Jacksonville against their biggest rival in the East. Now they've solidified their conference championship spot. The Bulldogs can pretty much walk home from here. I think they play Charleston Southern State or something like that here in 2 weeks. So they're going to put up a lot of points in that one. Georgia's SEC champion, I think, this year, and I think the Bulldogs have a really good stake at a national title. And obviously that means the honorable mention is the Cincinnati Bearcats. If there is some kind of weird chaos, if Alabama does lose in the Iron Bowl, I think that they're back in the mix. But I said it for the last 2 weeks, and now they lost one of their biggest ranked matchups coming up against SMU because SMU lost last weekend. They probably just don't have the style points to beat out. If Michigan ends the season undefeated, Michigan State ends the season undefeated, that means they would have beaten Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and then won the Big Ten championship. They get in over Cincinnati 10 times out of 10. I think Cincinnati, once they move to the Big 12, will have their shot, but for now, Cincinnati's my honorable mention, and that's my number one school is Georgia. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the FEOTB NCAA Football Top 10 for Week 10 of the college football season. Thank you very much for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on social media at FEOTB Pod. Listen to our new episodes every Wednesday wherever you listen to your podcast. We are also now available on Podbean and iHeartRadio. Really excited to be on those platforms. And be sure to subscribe to this channel that you're watching on now. We release our videos throughout the end of the week. It's pretty much Thursday through Sunday is when we have our videos come out. So be sure to subscribe and keep checking us out. Keep liking, interacting with us. We've enjoyed all of the interaction so far. We appreciate everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you over on the podcast coming up on Wednesday.